So the first of our 3 use cases was the idea of refreshing data. So we can update content when a user returns to the app, and typically this is done in onResume, even though onStart could also be a good place to do it. OnResume is the last method to happen before our activity is running. It's always guaranteed to run whatever the reason for a user leaving your app, and it's usually the place that most teams choose to refresh data, onResume. So let's go ahead to Android Studio now and see this in practice. So looking at our activity from before, we can see we have these 6 lifecycle methods here. I'm now going to go ahead and remove all of these and just play with the ones that we need. So I'm going to delete everything up to onCreate. I'll leave onCreate. And just to get this project a bit tidier, I think I'll remove some of the line breaks. And because in these use cases we're going to start to put some more UI components on the screen, some more user interface widgets, I think I will do best practice and switch to view binding. Remember, the way we do this, we go to our build.gradle file. We put a block called build features, and then view binding true. Now don't worry if you hadn't had this memorized, you could just type Android view binding and you'll be able to find that exact block. Code pretty quickly in the official documentation. So this now enables us to use view binding. So we'll do sync now to make sure these Gradle changes, this build file updates to our code. Okay, that's now finished. So now I can make a new class property. I'll call it private file binding, and it's activity main binding. And we're going to make it late init because we're going to initialize it later. So late init variable binding, and we're going to initialize it straight after super.onCreate. So binding equals activity main binding dot inflate, and we have access to the layout inflator. So now in set content view, I delete the direct layout file that we were doing before and simply do binding.root. This is a bit of a recap. You might have forgotten as it's been a little while since we've last done this, but that is how you do view binding activities. So now I can change my find view by ID for binding.buttonExit, and that's a little bit cleaner. I'm going to remove the new non-full screen activity, so I'll delete this line here, and I'll go ahead and actually delete the activity. So right click delete this non-full screen thing. I don't need that anymore. I'm getting a warning that it's being used in the manifest, I think, but we'll delete it anyway, that's fine. I can go to the manifest and remove that activity. Okay, this is looking pretty good. I'm going to remove the logs for now. I know these things work. And I'm going to put the finished code back in. Okay, so that's a bit tidier. I have flown through that, but if you can go ahead and get your code to the same state. It's best practice using view binding, as we're going to start to do some real things in our app now. So moving over to activity_main, I think I'll move the button to the very bottom. The way I'll do that is I'll just remove the top to the top of constraint, these opposing constraints that make it centered vertically. If I remove top to the top of, but leave bottom to the bottom of, it should jump down. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I'll give it a bit of bottom margin, 12 dp. Okay, so there we have the button at the bottom for now, because I want to put some other things in the middle. So we want to show the user has refreshed the app. So to do this, we'll do a placeholder bit of text. So text view, wrap content. I'll put it in the middle, so I'll do all 4 opposing constraints, and then do Alt-Enter, Option-Enter to import it. Okay, so tools text. And I can do this will be the refresh text. So for this example, showing how refreshing might work using our lifecycle methods, having a text view with an ID that we can interact with in the middle is what we need. So I can now go back to main activity, I can close the build file, close the manifest. So before we do the refresh functionality, we should simulate some sort of creation functionality where they come to the app for the first time. So let's do something really simple like go to the text view, binding.textView, refresh status, and then set the text. And we can set this to something like, welcome to the app, here is your feed. ... So let's go ahead now and run this, just to see our new simulated home screen. We won't actually build out a real home feed for the purpose of this exercise. So let's run it now. And there we go, Activity Lifecycle Playground app. Welcome to the app, here is your feed. And the exit activity button works as expected, it closes the app. As mentioned in the previous tutorial, there's a couple of places we could do a refresh thing. So we could do it in the onStart method, so I'll type onStart and override. We could do it there. This is when our activity becomes visible, but it also includes it being in the background. So it could be visible, but behind something like a WhatsApp floating messages window, which some apps can do. The other one would be onResume. And onResume is when our app is in the foreground. So it's not only visible, but it's the main thing on the screen. And so for this reason, this would be the most logical place to put this. The other reason why most teams, and certainly my team at the moment, choose to use this for refreshing data or updating things, it's the last lifecycle method that happens before our activity is running. You might put some code in onStart to refresh things, but some other stuff that might happen for some code you have in onResume, this might override it. So doing it at the last minute in onResume is the place that most teams do it, and I recommend the same. In fact, we actually rarely use onStart. There's not many reasons why you want to update things when the app is visible, but not actually in the foreground. 9 out of 10 times onResume is perfectly sufficient. So I'm going to remove onStart now and let you know that actually, if you never end up using the onStart method for any reason in your career, that's actually quite normal. There's nothing that says you have to use all 6 of these methods. That's one thing I want to get through to you. I'm showing you these 6 methods, showing you when and where they could be used, but also saying you don't need to use all of them all of the time, and some of them you might never use. So let's remove onStart. We're going to focus on onResume. So let's think about how we could show the idea of our app refreshing, updating when the app is resumed or returned to from the background. Well, you might think we'll do a binding and set the text view of our refresh status text to something like your feed has been updated. So we think we could do that to refresh. Well, let's run this code now and see what happens. So you might have been thinking it would have said, welcome to the app, here is your feed, as this was in our onCreate. But remember, whenever an activity is created, it will go through all 3 methods, onCreate, onStart, and then onResume before it's running. So even from the very, very first time it's been created, it sets the text, but then immediately overrides it with our refresh text. So actually, in this instance, we probably want to not set the text at all in onCreate, and actually set it in onResume. So we'll have our welcome text in the onResume method now, and we should get the same effect. Welcome to the app, here is your feed. So we need to change our code in a way to have the app know when it's a first load or know when it's been refreshed. So I'm going to go ahead now, remove this onStart method. We don't need that. So have a think, how would you code this? How can we have it so that when the app first loads, the app knows it's the first load, but after it's loaded, after it's running, then do something in code to tell the activity it's no longer the first load? How would you do this? Have a think. Well, a very, very simple way we could do this is with a Boolean variable in the activity. So I'm going to do exactly this. I'm going to make a variable private, and I'll make it var so we can change it, and we'll call it isFirstLoad. It's always good practice to make your booleans read like a sentence, almost like a question. Is first load, is new user, has seen the tutorial. That's really good practice. So this variable can be isFirstLoad of type boolean, and we'll set that by default to true. Of course, I don't need to have the variable. I can use type inference. We can infer that. So isFirstLoad equals true. It's a variable. We can change it. So we can do something like this. In our onResume, if isFirstLoad, then we'll show this text. Else, if it's not the first load, binding.textRefreshStatus.text equals your feed has been updated. So we can go ahead and run this now and see what text we get, see what happens. So let's run it. And we get, welcome to the app, here is your feed, because we have a Boolean variable called isFirstLoad, and initially it is set to true. So then if isFirstLoad, well, that's true, so this code runs. But what happens when we put the app into the background and bring it to the foreground again? So it's background the app, then we'll open it again. It remains on welcome to the app, here is your feed. Now again, can you think why this might happen? This is you now in debugging mode. You're trying to figure out there's a bug. Why isn't this text updating? So first load here to false. Open it again. Again, we can exit the activity, go into it afresh, where most teams choose to do it, as it's the final method that runs before activity is running. This is a really common thing. You see it all the time. So that is our first use case in action.